List the events of the Civil War. Yesterday, we were talking about the Battle of Shiloh and the U.S. wins, big-time battle losses. Look at that guy. Talking about some swagger right there. Ulysses S. Grant. He's going to save the day. Now, he's probably leaning up against that tree because he's drunk. He's often drunk. But hey, had a winning record. We'll win this war for the U.S. Later become one of the more corrupt presidents. But hey, what president isn't corrupt? So hey, this is going along with the plan of Winfield Scott's Great Snake. We're going to divide the Mississippi and then divide the Confederacy. So the next one's going to be Vicksburg. We're going to go down here to Vicksburg. We went over here at Shiloh, and now we're going to come down to Vicksburg. And the Battle of Vicksburg is more of a siege of Vicksburg. We'll surround the Confederacy. They get trapped. Poor move by the Confederacy, and the Union will surround them. They'll also surround the other residents of Vicksburg, men, women, children, slaves. Oh, you're trapped in the city that we're going to siege? Tough luck. Just surrender. Well, we don't have the choice to surrender. The army doesn't want to surrender, so I can't surrender until the military surrenders, and as long as they don't, we don't, so we're stuck here. And you are for 40 days while the Union bombs your city. Now, thankfully, not a lot of civilian casualties from the bombings, but you can read stories of Vicksburg where innocent civilians, yeah, but they're the enemies. They're civilians, they're kids, they're slaves that we're supposedly trying to free that are having bombs dropped on their head. You can read stories about bombs busting through buildings, and so that will happen for 40 days. To the point where they're actually building their own caves. The people are building fallout shelters. Americans are building fallout shelters, which are really just caves they're digging in the ground to protect them from other Americans. And then they start to pimp out their caves. They're like, oh, well, if we're going to be down here in this cave for 40 days, well, might as well bring down some of our furniture so we can just hang out. Eventually, though, as it draws on, 40 days, nothing's getting in, nothing's getting out. They start eating dogs, cats, horses, mules, rats. Probably not the best way to treat your fellow Americans, but hey, this is war, and it is only going to get worse. I mean, look at these casualties. 32,000 casualties. 29,000 soldiers surrender. That's going to hurt your causes when you lose 29,000 soldiers. Going to be pretty rough. All right, start to wrap this thing at Vicksburg, which ends right as Gettysburg takes place. So if you're following these dates, May is when it started, but 40 days later is when Vicksburg ends. And so Vicksburg and Gettysburg are kind of right sandwiched next to each other. Two major wins for the North, and this is pretty much the beginning of the end. The South was no longer winning. Vicksburg's going on, and so Lee has to now go on the attack. Originally, their plan was like wait it out, play defense, get some help from Europe. Eventually, North's just going to have to quit. That was the plan of the South. But the South is no longer winning all these battles. The South is not getting the supplies from Europe that they're counting on. So now they can't just play defensive. They can't just wait it out. They've got to go on the attack, or at least that's their plan. They say, all right, if we go on the attack, we get some big wins. We move into the North. Maybe we conquer some land. Then Europe's going to see that we're the real deal. And Europe, or one of these European nations, is going to ally with us, give us supplies, help us sustain, possibly win, or at least get this thing to a stalemate. So they invade the North, try to win some battles, track some support. It's not going to happen. Gettysburg, 53,000 will be killed / wounded on both sides. The North is ultimately going to win. But as I said, the numbers just keep going up. We're almost going to reach 1 million dead Americans over the course of 4 years. This is pretty terrible. This is pretty awful. And Mr. Lincoln's going to let us all know about that. After the battle, after this big, big win, he'll give the Gettysburg Address. Possibly, I don't even think I should say it possible. I'll just say it straight up. The greatest speech ever. Talks about government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. So he goes to this. Well, let's just read the speech. You can see he goes to Gettysburg to talk about what happened. And I will actually read it to you. Once upon a time, American students were forced to memorize this because it was good for them. I am too young to have been forced to memorize the Gettysburg Address, but I should have been. And maybe we need to bring this back. You're going to force us to memorize. This is rote memorization. Yeah, It is rote memorization. That's how you memorize a speech. And this is the most important speech ever. This is the most important speech in the history of America. And understanding the speech will help you understand America then, America today, and America forever. Wait a second, if I just learn this speech, then I'm pretty much going to understand America? Yes, that's why they used to teach us this, and that's why we probably should start teaching it again. 7 years ago, he's using weird language to explain how long ago. A score was 20 years, I believe. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. Yes, they did. Conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So they created this country. It's all about liberty, and it's all about men being created equal. And you're probably saying, yeah, but what about the slaves? We're getting to that. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here have gave their lives that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate it. We cannot consecrate it because we cannot hollow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our power to add or detract. The world will little note, wrong, nor long remember what we say here, absolutely wrong, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. We got to carry this thing on. It ain't about celebrating the past. It's about seeing what they did and taking it to the finish line. It is rather for us here to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause, for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. We got to finish the job, and not just the job of these soldiers, but the job of the original idea, which is this nation conceived in liberty and for equality. We got to get it there. We understand that during the American Revolution and the birth of our nation, that the founding fathers had this great idea and this great plan for our country. And they got it started, but they couldn't quite fully realize their idea of liberty. They couldn't quite fully realize their idea of equality. Jefferson, Washington, they knew that for this nation to grow, they needed slavery, but they also knew that this nation would die because of slavery. They could not figure that out. Jefferson and Washington and all of the founding fathers, they knew slavery was bad, but they knew that slavery was needed. Without slavery, you don't have America. But with slavery, you're going to end America. They couldn't figure that out. And now Lincoln's saying, 7 years, now we have the opportunity to finish this. They couldn't get it done then, but now we can realize a nation built on liberty. We can realize a nation built on equality. We're fighting the actual battles. People are dying now to make this happen. Let's not stop. Don't make their lives be in vain. They died for this. Keep going. We have a cause. We have a purpose. A nation built on liberty and equality. The Emancipation Proclamation was actually written a couple years before that. That will free slaves only in the slave states. So he says all slaves are free except for the slaves in the Union. Wait, what? You have no authority to free slaves in another country, but you do have authority to free slaves in your country, but you're only freeing slaves in another country. This would be close to me saying, if I were the president, slaves are free in Canada, but not in America. Well, you're not in charge of Canada, Mr. Dietrich. You're only in charge of America. You can free the slaves in America. Why don't you do that? Now, I don't want to free the slaves in America. I'll free the slaves in Canada. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but I'm just kind of saying what I'm kind of saying is like they're bad, and I want the slaves to rise up against the Canadians, and then we'll jump. Why don't you free the slaves in America if slavery's bad? Yeah, well, that would hurt me strategically. So, okay, so this is just all a bunch of nonsense possibly. Yeah, but it looks good, and it does look good. I mean, at least there's a government official saying slavery is bad, and we're going to stop it, and we're going to make this a big deal moving forward, and we're going to push towards equality. Yeah, well, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually do it, so why not actually do it? In free states. It's going to hurt us. Okay. So you can see again, Emancipation Proclamation. Slave states, you can't have slavery there. States that belong to the North, still cool. What? Anyway. Later, though, moving forward, the 13th Amendment will get passed, which will abolish slavery. So you've got the Emancipation Proclamation, which I believe was right after the Battle of Antietam. And then you got Gettysburg, and the tide's turning, and the idea now is definitely this thing's about equality. This war is about liberty. The goal is in front of us. Maybe before the war was to bring the South back. Maybe the goal before wasn't to end slavery. Maybe it was just to preserve the nation. Maybe that's what it was in 1861. Maybe that was the plan in 1862. But in 1863, preserving the nation, yeah, we want to preserve the nation, but that nation is a nation built on liberty and equality. That's what we are preserving. That's what we're fighting for. We have a cause. We have the moral authority in this war. We are motivated. And plus we're, got the momentum behind us. So everything's going to work out. Then you got Tecumseh Sherman, who then is William Tecumseh Sherman, is going to march through the South, burning everything in sight, destroying everything in sight, total warfare. We kind of got a little bit of this during the American Indian Wars. Now we get a full taste of what it means to have total war. It's no longer going to be Army 1 versus Army B. All right, let's fight, winner take all. Or that's how we're going to solve wars. It's going to be a gentleman's affair, one side versus the other. We're going to play by the rules. That stuff's out the window. And it's not just, well, they're cheating. No, this is the idea of nothing is off limits. And this is going to be pretty much the way of war forever now. You'll see this right, it's everywhere. Destroy everything. Cripple your opponent. And we can look at some of these quotes by William Tecumseh Sherman. It is only those who have neither fired a shot nor heard the shrieks and groans of the wounded who cry aloud for blood. More vengeance, more desolation. War is hell. Gotta like William Tecumseh Sherman, right? War is cruelty. There's no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it will all be over. This is the guy you want in charge. So Lincoln had some bad generals, but then he's got Grant, who might be drunk all the time, but he's winning. And then you got Sherman, who's just a lunatic, destroying everything in sight, punishing, pummeling the South, making them quit. You people of the South don't know what you are doing. This country will be drenched in blood, and God only knows how it will end. Basically, he's just going to bring it to them until they squeal, until they give up. He's going to twist their arm behind their back and make them tap out. And then when they tap out, he's going to rip their arm off. Right? Like, oh, you tapped out, you're done. Sorry. No. I'm going to make it so you never, ever even think of war. I'm not just going to say I win. I'm going to make you never, ever think of war again. Where is that quote? Don't I have it? I thought I had a quote that said, we're going to make them completely regret this. Check out the cyclorama in Atlanta. It's a pretty cool thing that shows you. It's a really old school way of presenting. I'm not going to tell you all the story, but if you're ever in Atlanta, please go to the cyclorama. The war is going to end at Appomattox Courthouse, April 9th, 1865. Lee will surrender to Ulysses S. Grant. Johnston will surrender, I think, a couple of days before that in Durham, North Carolina, to William Tecumseh Sherman. Days after the war, John Wilkes Booth will assassinate Lincoln. No, he doesn't have a bad headache. That's a bullet in the back of his head. After that, we'll get into Reconstruction in America without Lincoln and how the North and the South are going to come together. That's all going to be in Unit 5, the final unit of American History I. In the background, because there's a lot of stuff going on during this war, the Homestead Act, 1862 to 1986. Well, don't really worry about that. 1862, basically, all of this land, this Louisiana Purchase, the government bought it from France. They've got a bunch of land. Well, the government can't. What are they going to do with all this land? So they try to sell it. Remember, that's what they were selling this land in the Northwest Ordinance to people. But there's a war going on, and they need people to expand, and they need to grow food, and they need to expand the nation. At a point, 1862 is like, fine. If you go out west and you settle this land, you do a job. Like right now, it's just kind of wilderness. If you go out there and you farm it and you start building cities and towns and stuff, you just have it for free. So go out there for 4 or 5 years. I can't remember which it is. You go out there and we'll give you land. You just take care of that land for 5 years and it's yours. We just need people to move west. We need to expand the country. We need to develop all this land. So get out there. It's free land. Imagine that today. Imagine the government giving you free land today. The Morrill Act of 1862 will also be passed. And this is, so we're giving free land to farmers. We're also giving free land to people who, here's 30 acres, start a university, start a college, because we need to build farms. We need to build cities. We need to build businesses. We also need educated people out there. And that's the only way we're going to develop. So the government's just, all of these, Ohio State University was free land. Here it is. We got a big chunk of land. Put a university there. University of Wisconsin. The government says, here's some free land. Start building some buildings. Start teaching some people. And then last, the Pacific Railways Act. We need to build a transcontinental railroad. We'll talk about the transcontinental railroad in Unit 7. Right now, we're just kind of telling you the law that's set in place. The transcontinental railroad set the land aside, organized these different groups to build the railroad. There it is, Transcontinental Road. There's your Civil War events. That's it, man. One last unit before we end American History I. Check out all the other supplemental information on the Civil War if you really want to get into it.